All right. All right. So that you're alive button is my favorite button. Tells us that we're actually live. Hello, Susan. How are you?
Hi, Sharon. I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. And folks, we did not plan to have matching outfits or matching colors, but it just synergy, right? Synergy, energy. It just works. I'm so excited to have you here today, Susan, because I think the topic that you're going to speak on today, relationships and life after cancer, or how to juggle a diagnosis with your relationship and all that's involved, is such an important topic. And so, before we get started, I'm going to just say a little bit about your background. You are the owner of Coral Springs Counseling Center, an online telehealth marriage and family therapy practice in Florida. Her team specializes in couples therapy and anxiety management. Anxiety, you must be busy with the anxiety management. I mean,
We are extremely busy, so busy that we have grown from a solo practice to a team of six in a year.
wow. I laugh, but it's not really a funny thing because anxiety is so pervasive, and I think COVID did not help. But we
Yeah.
won't talk about that today so much, although cancer patients tend to have a lot of anxiety. We're going to talk today about how we balance all of that emotion with our relationship. But before we even do that, our mutual friend, Miss Andy, said you have a personal story as to how you became involved in therapy in the first place. Do you mind sharing a little bit on that?
Sure. Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
Uh, Back in 2011, I wanted to start my own family and went on the fertility journey and very quickly became pregnant. And I was elated, couldn't wait to be a mom. And at about 22 weeks pregnant, I ended up suffering from a loss without getting into too much of the detail. It was just catastrophic. It really threw me into a tailspin. I had a little girl I was pregnant with, and just the aftermath of that loss was devastating. And what that did to me, not just that day, but thereafter. From that point on, had to start the journey again, fertility treatments, and really struggled to get pregnant again. And then when I finally did, after many years, I suffered multiple pregnancy losses.
Oh,
So it was just a really grueling time. And what that did to me, what that did to my relationships was tough. But even though it was a really dark time and I sought the help that I needed and leaned on family and friends, what it did was it made me realize that I had a passion that I
mhm.
wasn't tapping into. I was a former school teacher for many years, and although I loved the kids and my colleagues and all the parents that I worked with, I had a calling to be a therapist. And I started my journey in private practice, and several years later, ended up leaving teaching and have a thriving private practice today. And
Mhm.
so, although it was devastating and I wish it never happened, what it did was it kind of pushed me into something that I really felt such a calling for and a passion for.
Well, first, I'm really sorry to hear that had to happen to you, but so many times it's out of our pain that we discover our mission, right? And our purpose. And so, for those of, who you're helping now, I mean, we're just thankful. We're
Yeah,
thankful.
yeah.
So, today we're talking a little bit more about a cancer person, a cancer patient, right? So they get diagnosed, they're going through the journey. How does that impact the relationship? What are you seeing in your practice? And how, what kind of tools can you give, that particular patient, that person, that relationship?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, to get a cancer diagnosis, I actually just had a therapy session earlier this week with a client who had a previous cancer diagnosis. And although she is in remission, thank goodness, what it has done to her relationship years later, she's still picking up, they're still picking up the pieces. And sometimes the person who's diagnosed, a lot of times, excuse me, they don't want to be a burden on
Yeah.
their family.
Yeah.
They don't want to ask for help. That's just not who they are. And then when you're hit with this like catastrophic news, um, you're going to need help a lot of times. You're going to need the help of friends and family and loved ones, and you're going to feel more vulnerable than you ever have. So it
Mhm.
really changes your position in
Yeah.
your relationship. And there's this analogy, if I can add, that I like to share. It's like I call it the car alarm analogy. So we all have been in a situation. Usually it's late at night, in the middle of the night when we're all sleeping, and we hear that ongoing car alarm, the neighbor's car alarm that just keeps going off.
Mhm.
And we wake up, we look out the window, and nothing's going on. No one's breaking into the car, no one's stealing the car, but it's sending off this signal. The wires have sort of gotten crossed. And so, in our lives, we all have, as human beings, we're all pretty dynamic. We can handle a moderate amount of stress. We have the tools. We know how to handle stress. We know how to handle the day-to-day challenges of life. But when you're hit with a cancer diagnosis or any other type of medical condition, it can really, your whole world comes crashing down, and all of the coping mechanisms that you're accustomed to utilizing, you don't really necessarily have it to use. And so we kind of like lose our grounding, and we lose those coping mechanisms that we normally have. And so we can, kind of lose a sense of connection with our partner. We can get angry quickly. We can, become sad and depressed, even if they look at us the wrong way. So kind of those like wiring systems that we didn't really need to, use before. Now we're kind of struggling. So that it's like a faulty wiring system that gets set with our day-to-day relationships due to this diagnosis, which is so devastating. So we need to kind of we need more coping mechanisms than maybe we're accustomed to. We need more maintenance for the relationship, kind of like that car needs to kind of go into the mechanic and needs to get a realignment. The wires need to get fixed so that the car alarm, which we need for safety, is actually used properly.
Yes.
So
I mean, what you said at the beginning of that, of your point, that when someone gets a diagnosis, especially if there is someone who was active and independent, you're right. And I'm speaking from my own experience. You don't want to be a burden to anyone, and not to your partner, not to your children. And you want to shoulder this alone. You don't even know how to shoulder it, because the thoughts that are going through your mind at that point is usually, when you get these kind of news, it's more like, what's going to happen to them? What's going to happen,
yeah,
not so much to me, but to them? How are they going to process? And so you have this emotional conversation with your own self, by yourself, trying
yeah,
to solve it yourself. So a person like that walks in your office, or you're coaching them online, counseling them online. What do you tell someone, especially someone who's just recently diagnosed? And like I said, it's not just have to be cancer, it could be anything. What do you say? How would they approach their spouse? How do they get their spouse in that conversation, who's also afraid? And
sure,
it's whether it's a woman or it's a man, it doesn't matter. Whoever gets
exactly.
it, right, it's going to affect the other person. What do you say to that person as to how to bring this conversation forward, how to navigate? Do you see that person individually, or do you recommend like a couples therapy?
Anytime I can get a couple together in one room is always ideal. It's
Mm.
really, so what we create in a therapy room is a safe space for people to slow down these vicious cycles that they spin in, and give
Mhm.
them an opportunity to hear each other in a way that they might not have been able to hear before. Like we've been talking about, the person who's been diagnosed doesn't want to be a burden, but the caretaker really wants to help fix the problem and they know that they necessarily can't fix the diagnosis. So they become stuck on what to do and how to navigate. And what you said earlier is loneliness. No one's really communicating because no one wants to ruffle any feathers. No one wants to hurt the other person. It's a very delicate, very sensitive time. So everybody's kind of suffering in silence. And
Yeah.
that becomes the disconnector in the relationship.
Speak to the woman or the man right now who's watching this or we're watching the replay, who's in this situation, who is having the private conversation, like, I don't want to bother, I don't want to be a burden, I don't want to. Speak to that person as to what would be your advice, because it's not healthy having the personal conversation, because you're actually forming your own conclusions about how other people are feeling when they're not even feeling that way. So how does an individual get past that self-talk to say, okay, how do we get past that?
Right. So there needs to be dialogue. I mean, I think this is what we're getting at here, but that just sounds much easier than it actually is. If everyone was having great communication around it, certainly I would be out of business. We wouldn't need to be having this talk today. So what happens is we don't necessarily know what to say. We don't want to say the wrong things. So as the caretaker, what I always suggest is ask your partner how they're feeling today. And I put that word today at the end because they might have different needs a different day. Maybe one day they're feeling okay because of the chemo, and the next day they might be feeling awful. So it's, what do you need from me today? Or what do you need this morning from me? Because it might change that quickly. Also, physical touch is really important for the caretaker, especially. A simple like hand on their shoulder or just reaching to hold their hand. They've actually done research around physical touch and what the impact is on that. It reduces anxiety and overwhelm. So although we can't fix the diagnosis, we can show support, we can be connected through physical touch. But always ask your partner, would it be okay if I held your hand? Get curious. So what is it that I need today? What is it that you need today? Would it be okay if I reached to hold your hand? Can you come and sit next to me on the couch?
So would that be the patient asking?
The caretaker.
That would be the caretaker asking the patient, would it be okay if I could touch your hand? That's good. That's good.
The other thing for the patient, for the person with the diagnosis, is this is a hard one, but it's asking specifically for what you need, not in a general sense, not I need more help with the kids, but saying I need help with the baths tonight. Can you bathe the children and put their pajamas on tonight? So just being very specific about what you need. And it gets frustrating because you think your partner knows what you need, that they can read your mind. They can't. And so if you could just let them know specifically what you need, that's going to go a long way.
It's so challenging because, even just asking for the help, saying I need help, it's such a disempowering, a conversation for the patient.
Yes.
Because you're saying I need help.
Yeah.
But the patient has to get beyond that. Is there anything that you can suggest, that any type of self-talk or any type of I don't know, what can you say to that patient to say, hey, it is okay, you have permission to, at this point, to be in need. You have the permission, because I don't think we give ourselves the permission. I had a very supportive spouse, and I know Peter, who is on the screen, his wife and I were diagnosed at the same time. And know Peter is an amazing guy. My husband was an amazing guy. So I know that he was there supporting his wife. And I've also spoken to his wife. And I know that my husband was amazing. So we feel fortunate. We're blessed. And because we've had a long marriage and great communication skills between each other. And even then, with 36 years of marriage, I still felt bad asking for extra help, right? So how can you help people like myself who are more independent thinkers just relax and know it's okay?
I have two things I want to say about this. In this day and age, asking for help is really challenging.
Yeah.
But I think if we could take for just a second the diagnosis out of the equation, asking for help from your partner is important, especially when there's a family involved, children involved, or not. Any type of asking for help is okay in a marriage, and that's so I think normalizing and doing some self-talk around that. It's okay to ask for help. Even if I didn't have this diagnosis, I can still ask my spouse because they're my spouse. They love me, and I need to let them in. And that leads me to the other part, which is when you let your partner in to help, it gives them a sense of control in a very uncontrollable time. And it also gives them an opportunity to connect to you. So you're actually doing a really great service for the marriage as a whole by you asking for help. So I actually think it puts you in a good position and very empowering position if you could reframe it in your own thought process.
Yeah. And Peter says he likes to say, "Tell me what I can do." And I'm just going to say, Peter being the husband, this is for all the spouses, the ones who are not the one who is ill. I think it's really helpful if you really are the one who say, "Tell me what I can do," because it takes the pressure off us we feel like we're begging again, right? We're begging again. So if the spouse can be a little bit more empathetic, tuned in, clued in, and I guess I know too that spouses go through the mental anguish too. They're carrying a burden. It's not in their own bodies, but I know they're carrying the burden mentally because they're wondering what's going to happen. So I get that we're both suffering, just one's more suffering physically, one's more suffering emotionally. I understand that. But I would say, to Peter's point, yes, the "tell me what I can do" is so helpful from the spouse perspective, because it opens up the conversation for me to say, or the person to say, "Here's how I feel," than me initiating the conversation.
Yes. I really like that. The phrasing of that. There's actually I've done some research on, like, when you're interviewing someone. I know we're kind of going in a different direction for a moment here, but when you say, do you have any questions? Someone's probably not going to ask questions, but if you say, what questions do you have? That invites people into asking questions when they might not want to. So I really like the phrasing of, tell me what I can do, is an assumption that you need me. Just let me know what you need me for.
Yes.
Rather than, can I help with anything? Is there anything you need?
Yes, it's so much more specific. Sarah made a good point here. She said it's important to know that amazing, one of my favorite words, does not only mean people who know how to support. We can have an amazing spouse who's struggling just as deeply with fear, loss of control, not knowing what or how to do support. Men especially have a more difficult time expressing emotion. So talks like this really allow new conversations to spur. I agree, because it's so true. She's right. Men, not all men are like Peter or, vocal. Men can struggle because they are in fear as well. And they just really don't know what they feel helpless. On any given day, men tend to feel helpless around women anyway, much less when there is a diagnosis around. And as you said, Susan, at the beginning, it's not just cancer. It's any serious illness that's debilitating in some way that we need to then come together as couples. And it's like a shared situation. It's almost like this is a shared situation between the both of us. Go ahead, Susan.
One other thing I just wanted to add, I talk to my clients, my couples all the time about the use of technology. There's
Yeah.
always this negative talk about technology, but something that couples can do if they're really struggling with communication is send each other text messages. If you can't verbally say it out loud, then just send a text message. What can I do?
That is
Or I really need to help with the kids tonight. Can you do that? And just send it in a text message. And that way it eliminates all the awkwardness of the verbal communication.
I think that's a brilliant point. I really do. And I'll tell you why. Because sometimes you're just not ready for a conversation, both sides, especially when it's going on and this illness is right here with us for a while. You're not ready for that conversation at every moment of the day. But a text message, I totally agree. It's a little bit more almost neutral, clinical. Those are not great words, but the person could be in another room. It's safe. I don't have to see their expression, to see my expression. I could be in my bedroom just wanting to lay down, wanting to have some space, and he could be downstairs chilling. And I'm still telling you what I need without having to have the awkwardness.
Right. And the other thing is if you text it, sometimes someone might get triggered by the verbal request.
Yes.
But they can take a moment to process, without the other person seeing that they got triggered. And then they can respond, a moment or two later without frustrating the person who's, asked the question.
Sarah has a question. Can you speak to someone experiencing a diagnosis who doesn't have a partner, a single mom or a dad, a widow or a widower? That's true.
Oh, absolutely. It's a very isolating, it's even more isolating, I should say, very lonely. So I think I'd like to speak to the family and friends that might be listening, that it's so important to not just reach out the day of the diagnosis or the day of the treatment, but it's the in-between times. It's the times that are really quiet that you think they might be doing okay. Reach out to that family member. Again, a simple text message on some random day to say, thinking of you, or just know I have your back. I'm here for you. Or what are you doing next week? Let's meet for coffee. And do that on a regular basis. Oh, you need a team. You need a community of people. And if you don't have it with a spouse or, close network of family or friends, a support group is always around the corner.
And I'll let you close on this point, Susan. Speak to this other factor that plagues people who are diagnosed, where you have the support, whether it's friends, family, whether it's spouse, where they don't control their own emotions. So they're around you and they're burdening you with their own fears. That is such a negative impact on the patient when in your eyes I'm seeing the worry, you're seeing the dead already, or you're telling me stories careless of other people who had gone through who didn't make it. And sometimes it's just a nervous reaction from people, but speak to that as well, because it's hard on both, especially hard on the patient to hear these negative conversations. And that's the reason why many patients won't share, because they don't want that feedback. And people love to tell you stories about someone else who had what you had and didn't make it ever.
You're bringing up such a great point that the bottom line is our loved ones at their very best don't know what you're going through. No one knows what you're going through. And they're going to say things that are going to hurt sometimes. And so we have to create a new language around this. And it's not easy. It is not easy. And things are going to get triggering and things are going to feel overwhelming and icky. I know that's not a medical term, but I'm going to use it anyways. Again, and I think this is where therapy can really be beneficial. That if you're really feeling triggered by family, you're feeling burdened by family, you're the one going through this crisis, you're feeling alone and people aren't getting you, reach out for support, because a therapist can actually help you create dialogue. They can
Yes.
help you work through the emotions and create dialogue so that you can bring that back to your loved ones and create a safer space for everyone.
Yeah. We like to end our show. This was great. And I told you, Suzanne, it was supposed to be 10 or 15 minutes, but we're at 25.
Wow,
Great
time flies.
Time flies when you're having fun. And we're so thankful to Sarah and Peter for their questions. But we like to end the show on an upbeat note. So, we talked about what T Talks is really about, T cells. So leave us with something, leave that patient or that spouse with a practical tip that they can put in effect immediately that will help to change the energy perhaps in their environment, in their space.
Look, I don't want to downplay a diagnosis, and I want to be really mindful here. It's challenging, it's catastrophic, it's overwhelming. However, perspective is everything. And if you need to kind of get out of your funk, there are quick ways to do so. Throw on some music, stand up, create movement, dance if you like to dance, or go take a little brisk walk outside if you have the energy to do that. You can shift your perspective quickly. Does not mean it minimizes what you're going through as the patient. What it does is it gives you an opportunity to lessen the intensity and the overwhelm of the emotions that you're going through. So whatever you need, whatever quick fix you need in that moment, and let somebody know, hey, I'm having a bad moment today. I might be fine later, but I am having a bad moment today. Can we talk? Yes. Reach out for support. There are people out there. And especially in this tech savvy world, if your family and friends are not there or not close by, find a support group, find a therapist.
Well said. Well said. Susan, it was so great having you. And I'm hoping that, our talk today will be an encouragement to that individual or that couple that's having to walk this journey in this particular time. There is help. There is, like you said, there's therapy help. That's always good. I know that a lot of people take advantage of that during cancer because of, like I said, all the triggers that are associated with that. And as you said, there's practical things too. Going for that brisk walk, just reaching out to someone saying, hey, I am not having a great day today. Putting on praise music, putting on, whatever music you love, but do something to change your energy. And I'll just take Peter's last comment. I try to always remember cancer is a journey and a lifelong one. Good news today does not mean good news tomorrow. That is so true. And we thank you again, Susan, for being our guest today. And love to have you back again in the future.
Absolutely. I'd love to come back.